kindlasti jagame teiega salvestust ka hiljem, kui teil ei ole võimalik terve aja jooksul osaleda või kui tahate kellelegi kolleegile jagada tänast üritust. Minu nimi on Maria, ma olen Tallinna strateegiakeskusest koostöös kolleegidega, kellest osa on siin ka, nagu Irma Remma ja Aado Altmets, kes ühineb hiljem. Koordineerime välisprojekti nimega GoGreenRoutes, mis on siis üks Horizonite projektidest, kus Tallinn osaleb partnerina. Keskendub projekt rohelahenduste katsetamisele konkreetsel pilootalal, milleks on meie puhul Vormsi roheala Lasnamäel. Meiega koos on ka teised linnad ja mitmesugused partnerid, kellest üks on ka John Gallagher, keda me kutsusime täna meiega jagama oma kogemusi. Üldiselt kogu projekt keskendubki tõesti sellele, kuidas linnakeskkonnas saaks kestlikumaid rohelahendusi teha ja neid teaduspõhiselt rakendada ja selle tõttu me tundsime, et tahame ise kuulda natukene täpsemalt, millised teadmised on partneritel ja miks seda siis teadmist endale hoida. Otsustasime, et teeme avatud vabas õhkkonnas võimalikult mitteformaalse kohtumise. Ehk siis kohe annan sõna ka Johnile ja kindlasti, kui teil on küsimusi, siis esitage neid chati või kindlasti siis esitage neid ise, kui tekib küsimuste voor. John, I will let you introduce yourself, but also you can mention if you would like to take questions only after or people could raise their hands also during the event. How would you prefer?
Thanks, Maria. I am happy to answer questions at any time because perhaps the topic I'm talking about is new to some of you. And if there's something that you don't understand at a specific slide, please do raise your hands or just turn on your microphone and ask the question. I'm okay if you want to interrupt me. There's no problem there.
Great, but then the floor is yours, and I really encourage everyone to participate actively in the event. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria, and thank you for the invitation to the team to speak today. It's always nice for me to speak about this topic because it's an area I've been working in for more than 10 years, almost 15 years, looking at ways to improve the outdoor environment, and using green solutions is just one way to improve environmental quality. So as Maria introduced, I'm from Trinity College Dublin in Ireland, and we're part of this consortium project where we're partnering with Tallinn around introducing green infrastructure or nature-based solutions in the city. What I'm going to cover today is going to talk about environmental quality and how green solutions can help improve them. But I'll also kind of cover a little bit at the beginning of this GoGreenRoutes project, just to introduce it to you if you're not familiar. I'm going to explain my approach to improving conditions in the environment, and also introduce what I consider as environmental quality. Then talking about green infrastructure or nature-based solutions. The reason I say both of those terms is because different people from different backgrounds refer to them in using one or either of these terms. And for me, I'm an engineer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an urban planner. I'm not an architect. So my approach to green infrastructure or nature-based solutions is trying to design them to improve environmental quality. And I'll explain my process of how I do so, and hopefully some of that might be beneficial to you in the future when you are developing projects around nature-based solutions or green infrastructure. So before I talk about environmental quality, I must mention the project that the Tallinn team that invited me here today and myself are involved in. It's the GoGreenRoutes project, a large European project looking at the role of nature and the physical and mental well-being benefits of exposure to green. We're a very wide, huge consortium of partners, 40 partners from 18 countries, a huge amount of researchers, city bodies, small companies, and not-for-profit organizations. And you can see that we're distributed all across Europe, but also we have partnerships beyond Europe to, I suppose, share what our experiences and our knowledge that we developed during the project. And as you can see, a huge range of organizations that that we represent. So I'm coming from the academic side of things. My approach is that I'm undertaking research, but I want to undertake research that has practical impact within the cities that we're partnering, such as Tallinn. Slide just jump very quickly. So before I start talking about nature-based solutions or green infrastructure, I must introduce environmental or quality, specifically indoor environmental quality, before we talk about outdoors, because this is a more recognized area in the indoor environment. Wherever you're sitting at the moment, you may have preferences when it comes to how comfortable you are in terms of temperature, how peaceful or tranquil the space is in terms of sound, how good the lighting is, also the air perhaps, the smell, and any sort of vibrations that you experience. So the concept of indoor environmental quality aims to try and create a space that has good quality in each of these different areas. And for me, I look at the outdoor environment in the same way. How do we create outdoor spaces that have give you a positive experience when it comes to all of these different factors? So from an environmental standpoint, is it peaceful? So no traffic sounds, for example, or unwanted industry sound. Is the air clean for you to breathe? Are you comfortable? Is it too hot or too cold in the specific environment? And how can green infrastructure improve all of these factors? So one of the aspects of the GoGreenRoutes project is that we want to develop an outdoor environmental quality index, where we recognize that there is noise and air pollution, there is heat, excess heat in times in certain locations in the city, and there is also a biodiversity element, which I won't focus on today so much, but it is part of our project. And we want to ensure that we develop green spaces that ensure that we provide a more natural sound. We try to omit traffic noises, and we try to use the green infrastructure to reduce that. We also try to improve air quality and provide a level of comfort thermally. So maybe that's tree shading when it's too hot, but also tree shading when it's cold and can provide a warmer location. So we approach the project by assessing the current and how introducing green infrastructure or nature-based solutions can simply improve things. So we recognize that there's unique environmental challenges, though, in every single city we're dealing with. Tallinn is very different to the city of Limerick in Ireland in terms of the temperatures that you observe throughout the year, the quality of air, the types of noise pollution that might exist, and the local biodiversity. So what we are doing is we are looking at a range of indicators or measures that can be defined, and then we can select appropriate solutions, appropriate green infrastructure or nature-based solutions that can provide improvements. Essentially for me, by understanding the current environmental quality, the current air, current noise, pollution sources, the reality of what temperature problems there is, if there is, we can use that to inform the design. Then with this process, each city can have its own unique solutions that meet the needs of the users of the green spaces in each city. So I'm only going to focus on elements of environmental quality that I hope you can relate to in this talk today. When it comes to sound, a lot of the work that my colleagues have been involved in, I wouldn't historically have been working in the sound or noise pollution field. My expertise initially was air pollution. The role of noise barriers on large urban roadways or highways play a significant role in reducing noise pollution into residential areas. But the use of green infrastructure or nature-based solutions can present a similar benefit on the outskirts of a city park. They can mitigate noise pollution in the park itself. When it comes to air, if we imagine that large roadways usually are beside green spaces like parks, the benefit of green infrastructure, that is trees and hedgerows and other green infrastructure that exists on the boundary of the park, can reduce the infiltration of pollution into the park. And lastly, the role of urban heat island and the thermal impacts of the urban environment, and how green spaces can provide an escape location where temperatures are a degree or two or several degrees lower if the right green infrastructure is selected, and offers a respite, a location of more tranquil or lower temperatures, as well as a more peaceful and cleaner air environment. So the focus of my work is to try and bring these together, to try and help identify the best green infrastructure that will collectively improve the noisescape, the soundscape, the air quality, and reduce urban heat island effects within green spaces. So a lot of solutions or introduction of green infrastructure or nature-based solutions in the city, or indeed any environment, people focus on the reduction of CO2 emissions. So the tree is uptaking, or the hedge or any green infrastructure is removing CO2, carbon dioxide. But for me, it can offer so many more benefits if it is well designed. And that's the kind of focus of really where I'm going to take you over the next 10 or 15 minutes. So when it comes to nature-based solutions or green infrastructure, it depends on what your preference is for the language. A lot of projects focus on the assessment or the impact of these solutions after they are installed. For me, I want to focus on designing them from the beginning with the objective of improving the environmental quality for these individuals here. So a lot of studies to date have introduced nature-based solutions, and then they have measured and they have realized that it has an improvement, but they don't know until they complete the introduction of the solution. My work is using modeling techniques and monitoring, and then examining different options, is to try and optimize the nature-based solution to improve the air quality by a certain proportion. Maybe we want to halve the pollution in this area because we know there's lots of traffic sources here. We can try to design this in a way that will reduce the pollutants by half here. We also might want to reduce the decibel or the noise pollution by a certain proportion. And we might want to reduce the temperature by having tree cover here as well. So my approach to the role of mitigating environmental pollution, whether it's air, noise, or if you want to think of excess temperature as a pollutant of sort, is through combining measurement, modeling, and then a mitigation technique. There's different approaches to improving air quality. You can simply reduce the quantity of pollution. You can reduce the intensity. That's when you have either less cars on the road polluting or less industry. You make the cars more efficient so that they pollute less. But really where I'm focusing on is accepting that there is some pollution remaining. And therefore, what I'm trying to do with respect to air quality, for example, is reduce the quantity of pollution that's in the air around us. And we're simply doing that by the use of nature-based solutions to influence the flow of pollution in the environment around us. There's a concept that we use in engineering referring to source receptor pathways. So if you all imagine that you are the source, nearby there is a receptor, or sorry, excuse me, you are the receptor. Nearby there is a pollution source, that might be a car or some industry. And what I want to do is I want to design the pathway. What I mean by that is I want to understand how the polluted air from the car gets to me standing at this location, and how can I introduce nature-based solutions between us to disrupt that natural pathway of the pollution. So essentially, let me just move to this part of the slide. When it comes to pollution, and I'm going to talk about air to start the conversation today because I don't have time to talk in detail about all of the different aspects of environmental quality. We're going to focus on air quality as an example. And the graph or the figure on the right represents the air quality in the city. The green represents the bad air pollution that might exist across all of the city. The blue represents the pollution that might exist in your neighborhood. And then the yellow and the red represent the pollution that exists very close to you, perhaps within 5 or 10 meters. If you imagine walking down a street and there is much traffic on that street, then the air quality in that local, very local environment is much higher. And it is that pollution that can lead to the most significant health problems, as it leads to respiratory problems or breathing problems for some people. And therefore, if we can reduce that very high significant peak here using nature-based solutions, therefore we are achieving improved air quality in the environment. So the focus of this work is to recognize that we cannot remove the pollution from the city itself or the neighborhood. It's really looking at the localized, very localized pollution. So what I want you to imagine is that if you're outside a park, a green space with traffic passing by, then you're here, the most polluted part of the area. But maybe you're only 5 or 10 meters away, you're inside the park, their pollution might be significantly lower. But how do you introduce nature-based solutions in this location between the outside and the inside of the park to ensure that you can reduce the pollution concentration that you're breathing inside the park in the best way? In the same way, if you think about noise pollution, the traffic is making the noise, and therefore how can you introduce nature-based solutions to help prevent the decibels or reduce the decibels of noise that are inside the park. Because a peaceful park is a much more enjoyable place to be than quite a noisy, and you can hear the traffic, an area where you can hear traffic. So my approach to improving environmental quality, I need to understand several things in designing nature-based solutions. The first is to understand the urban environment, its physical structures, the buildings, the geometry of the green spaces, etc. I also really need to understand the local meteorology, the wind direction, the wind speed, the temperature conditions, and other environmental factors that may influence the transport of pollution. It's important also to understand traffic flows, if they are the main source of pollution, but maybe you also have industry. And lastly, the type of pollutant. Not every pollutant behaves the same. Different size particles, for example, behave differently. Large particles will drop out of the air quite rapidly because they are heavier. And nature-based solutions can help reduce the wind speed and they drop out faster. But smaller particles require different considerations. There's pollutants that are gases and they behave differently also. So you need to understand the traffic or industry and the pollution that is coming from there, the physical aspects, and lastly, the environmental conditions. Where is the wind coming from most of the time? How might this be moving the pollution into the park? And how can we then design nature-based solutions more effectively? So with regards to this idea of how do we design nature-based solutions in the urban environment, and this is an example of a city park in Dublin in Ireland. Is this park improving the air quality, the noise pollution, and the thermal comfort of individuals inside the park? How does this green affect air quality, noise, and thermal comfort in this area? Also, to recognize there is also the biodiversity element, but I'm not going to focus on that so much today. So I'm going to talk about explain, air and sound as two of the factors. So when it comes to air quality, for example, the introduction of nature-based solutions, that might be a hedgerow or a tree, can reduce the pollution on the other side of inside or outside of a park quite significantly. I hope you can see this picture okay, but there is two blue circles here and here, and both represent someone walking outside the park and inside the park. The reduction of particle pollution ranges between 15 and 30%, and BC reflects something called black carbon, which is a particle pollution sourced from traffic. And essentially, by walking inside the park versus outside the park, this reduction can be quite significant, up to half for certain types of particles. Why is that? Well, it's two reasons. One, you are at a further distance from the traffic, but most importantly, two, the introduction of nature-based solutions or green infrastructure can disrupt the airflow. It prevents particle pollution entering the park and improves air quality for an individual inside the park. The same evidence can be said for noise. And these are both examples of studies where I've been involved in or collaborated with researchers in the UK or Ireland. This is an example of the noise level when two people, one walked on the outside of the park and one walked 5 meters away inside the park, with the difference being that there was nature-based solutions or green infrastructure between them. The green infrastructure did vary throughout the area or perimeter of the park. So in some areas, people outside could see their counterpart inside. So there was not so much green infrastructure. And this is an example of where there was a very small amount of green infrastructure between them. However, when there was significant densities of green infrastructure available and also distance, there was a value to being inside the park. And you can see that the blue line representing the noise level inside was much lower. And the density of the green infrastructure or the density of the nature-based solution can improve this further if designed effectively. Now, this study is an example of a location where green infrastructure already existed. But with the research that we're trying to do, we will try to help introduce more to maximize the reduction of noise pollution. So informing the design to improve environmental quality is the focus of my work. We want to evaluate the existing. So this picture at the bottom represents a model which identifies where air pollution, for example, is at its highest in a city street. And with that sort of information, we can then explore how to improve air quality in these locations. So through monitoring and modeling, we can look at the problem areas, and then we can explore using modeling as well, methods to select the most appropriate nature-based solution. That might be a hedgerow, which is very low to the ground, traffic, which would be beneficial for air and maybe some noise coming from the tires of the car meeting the surface of the road, which produces a lot of noise in streets. But then maybe you need trees separately because you want to reduce the high temperatures that exist within a park. What we want to do is try to decide or identify the most appropriate nature-based solutions to achieve a certain improvement in performance. So when it comes to informed design, we want to go beyond the traditional research and focus of nature-based solutions, and that is to introduce them and then to measure the benefit after. We want to use monitoring data and modeling as a way to design them to be even better, so that green spaces can be somewhere that you go to and you know that they have been designed to try and improve air quality, to create a calm environment, peaceful environment, and also to provide locations where you can be more comfortable in high temperatures, where the green infrastructure or nature-based solutions can provide a cooling factor. But we can do that, and I suppose my engineering approach to nature-based solutions focuses on that approach. So what do you need to try and approach this challenge in a way that I would do so? I just want to briefly explain the process that I take when doing so. And I'm going to highlight that what I'm presenting today is currently in development of a new guidelines document in collaboration with the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, and also several other organizations and research institutes. in the US and the UK. So we want to consider the different environments firstly. And the reason I know we're working with talent specifically in on a park area and an open space, but I also want to describe the scenario of the city street as well. So we have two typical variations, two different environments. The open road, which a park might be beside, or a more urban center of a street. So you can imagine or take this problem in either environment. The next thing you need to do is to define the characteristics, the physical characteristics of the environment that you're in, and also the physical characteristics of the vegetation that you want to introduce. Here is just an illustration of some different layouts or configurations of green infrastructure that offer different outcomes. So if you imagine that you have a row of trees or a spaced layout of trees or one pocket of trees, when it comes to air quality, noise, and temperature, each of these options will have a different outcome, whether you are in the street or you're in a park. And therefore, understanding the physical environment that you are in and the physical characteristics of the vegetation, you can decide and you can investigate which is the most appropriate for the problems that you feel are evident in your location. So do you want to improve air quality? Do you want to improve noise? Or do you want to provide a more reduced temperature in hot weather climates in the summer? So that is the physical characteristics. Then there's also the vegetation characteristics. And this is not something that I myself am an expert in. And also it has to be focused on the location that you're in, the city or the country. So for me, what I can provide is a suggestion of the level of density of vegetation, if it should be quite open or closed as a tree or a hedgerow. Because what I wanted to do is either to block the pollution or allow the pollution to enter the tree or the hedgerow and then be removed inside. I can also perhaps suggest that the leaf type of the tree has a surface that attracts pollution, for example. It has a sticky nature. However, I cannot tell you what species it should be because I recognize that your city and every city or country has unique species that are local to their location. What I can provide as an engineer, though, is the structure. If it should be tall and wide or narrow or low, I can give you the physical dimensions. And that's where I come into this conversation. I need to work with urban planners and other experts to provide the best solution. And just lastly, it's also then about the dynamic aspect of vegetation. What I must recognize is within each city and country, pollution changes throughout the year and the environment changes. And I recognize Tallinn is very different to Ireland. And Estonia is very different to Ireland in terms of temperatures, and indeed every city we are working with in Europe has very different environments. So in selecting vegetation, do you have an air pollution problem in summer and winter? And if so, will the vegetation or the nature-based solution provide the same level of benefit throughout the year? In low temperatures, air pollution stays quite low to the ground. And if trees do not have leaves during the winter, then they are not providing the same benefits. So you want to consider the problem. Is it a problem all year? Are people using your green spaces throughout the year? Is winter, are people in the park in winter? Is it as important to improve air quality in the park in winter? But also then you make sure you have a native species as well. So there is a balance between the physical environment, the characteristics of the vegetation, and recognizing that the vegetation also changes throughout the year and doesn't provide the same level of benefit potentially. So in my last few slides, I have taken Vormsky Park in your city. That is the case study for our GoGreenRoutes project, Horizon 2020 project. And what I want to do is present questions rather than answers. Unfortunately, I don't have all the answers. But based on what I've said, how would you identify the urban form, the shape of this area? Is this more an open area or is it a built environment? I think it's quite obvious this is an open space as opposed to a city street. But questions around local meteorology, traffic flows, and also the types of pollutants are something to consider. So for example, the urban form, it's a very open area, a green space. There is no significant buildings around this that might greatly influence air quality or airflow or the environmental conditions in the park. But there must be a predominant common wind direction in this park. And therefore, the traffic, which I understand, if I forgive me, this is the different traffic distributions, for example. This is the main traffic street in the north of the park. Is the wind blowing pollution into the park? So is it moving downwards? Or is the airflow moving up northwards and moving pollution from the street away from the park? So maybe pollution isn't the problem. Understanding these two factors together are important. And then lastly, just to recognize that, are we dealing with particles as a problem in the city, or is it nitrogen dioxide, both from traffic, or ozone, which can be produced through its relationship with nitrogen dioxide. One interesting thing during COVID in Ireland, and I'm sure it happened in Tallinn perhaps as well, is that as NO2 pollution reduced with more people working from home, ozone pollution increased. But also we must recognize that there is certain pollutants that come from vegetation as well, volatile organic compounds. But I'm not going to address that aspect today. So you need to understand all of these different factors before making informed decisions around nature-based solutions and the most appropriate solution for your green space. I just want to kind of close, and I'm more than happy then to discuss and open the floor for questions. In that, where do you go after, I suppose, my short presentation in this area, because I've only introduced the topic a little? Well, there's been a number of papers, scientific papers, that have combined all of the knowledge that we have in this area. When it comes to air pollution, which would be my core area over the years, there has been a number of very important documents that have helped urban planners to select green infrastructure in either urban environments like city streets or in open areas like parks and schools, to try and decide and design the most appropriate solutions, nature-based solutions. I have some links on this slide, but also I'm more than happy for someone to contact me and I can give them additional details, or through perhaps Maria and her colleagues, I'm happy to share. But through GoGreenRoutes, we hope to even bring this further, where it's not just air, as some of these guidance and tools have focused on to date, but also to try and design green spaces with better tranquil environments, so less noise pollution, and also provide thermal comfort, whether it's reducing the temperature in summer or perhaps keeping it a little higher in winter. That is the benefit of nature-based solutions. So really, just to close, it's important, I believe, that environmental quality needs to be tailored to a given location. And so for Tallinn, it's very unique and we need to identify what is the most important factors for the users of the green space in Tallinn. For me, my research goes beyond just assessing the impact of nature-based solutions after they've been installed. So it's ensuring the design is effective, but you also need to monitor effectively in the beginning to do so. And what we can do is achieve a balanced outcome so that we improve air quality, we reduce noise pollution, and we provide a more comfortable thermal environment in the green spaces as we move forward. Because if we look at one, we might end up having negative impacts on the others. And I think we all want to create a healthy urban environment that benefits us all in different ways. So that is my closing slide. Thank you again for listening. Thanks, Maria, for the invitation. I don't know if there was any questions during. I saw something come up, but it wasn't in English, so I couldn't comment. So I'll stop sharing, and I'm happy to take any questions and open discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, John. There were no comments or questions. It were just my own comments for participants. But we are happy to take questions now. If you have any, I hope you do. So feel free to ask or write or raise your hand. Both are good.
Well, I hope people understood the topic that I was going through, more importantly.
Well, one of my own questions, maybe I could start, was that if we think about an alternative way to reduce noise or air pollution in Tallinn or Estonia, we see often that along the highways we have those kind of usual physical barriers.
Yeah.
In your experience, and maybe you can say if it has been also researched, how effective they are, and what's the difference if, for example, they would be substituted with some vegetation instead.
So there has been a work done in the US in particular around noise barriers in highways, and a lot of studies have found that the green infrastructure can have the same level of benefit as a physical wall, but you want to ensure that it is there all through the year, so something that is green all year round and also has a high density. So you can achieve the same outcomes, and studies have shown that, but I think people have not, maybe it's still regulation for road design that you have to have a physical structure, but green infrastructure can provide the same benefits. I guess, Maria, the one challenge is that a tree does not grow as quickly as a wall is constructed. So you have that time challenge. But the studies have shown that the benefits are there. The question is, how do we change the practices, and how do we introduce maybe trees that are already grown into those locations because they can provide the same benefit? And it would be much nicer than a wall.
Yeah, definitely. But also maybe a combination of both somehow. I don't know how much it is practiced.
Yeah, so it is commonly done, and the reason it is twofold. But it removes pollution as well. So the one benefit of a green infrastructure around a roadway is that the particles, if we talk about particle pollution, will stick to the leaves of the trees. The wind speed is reduced as the air goes through the tree, and the particles also fall out of the air. My simple way of describing it. So by adding the green beside a wall, you're also removing some of the pollution as well. So that is probably another benefit that a wall does not provide. It's simply just an obstruction. And therefore, green infrastructure can have this added value. And also, on driving on a road, it has also been shown psychologically to have green on the roadside helps your kind of mental and physical well-being when just driving on a constant straight line.
But can you also tell how important it is that if greenery or the leaves absorb or stick to their leaves all the particles, that they would also change? I mean, in the autumn, that leaves would definitely fall, or if you compare to evergreens, is it important that, well, they regenerate in this way?
Yes, there is that element. It also depends on the climate that you have in terms of rainfall, because the rainfall also benefits in that you're washing the tree to some degree. Some people have worries that introducing certain types of trees, that the trees might not survive, that the pollution might have a negative impact on the trees, but there are many species that are not impacted. I have colleagues who have done research on fruit even growing beside the road, and people were worried that the fruit might be impacted, polluted, you know, and they've shown that it's not a negative impact. So it is more beneficial if you can select a species that is green all year round. I know the leaves might fall off and remove the pollution, but if you have a significant rainfall, that will also provide that benefit. So it's a balance between, it's very specific to the area that you live in, or the city you live in, or the country you live in.
Do we have any questions from anyone else? Or I think this either it's very clear or very confusing usually if no one is asking questions.
I hope it's the first.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask very good presentation, but have you got any data of the noise pollution observation of the greenery, or comparing to the noise walls? Because in Estonia we have this kind of situation that we don't take into account any greenery when we are analyzing the noise pollution situation. So yes, any scientific data that we can do it, we can take it into account, or does the greenery just gives its own nice noise which rises the base of the environmental noise?
That's a good question. I will have to look at what the tools can include. There is research that has found that the decibels have been reduced, but I don't know if there is high quality information around specific densities of vegetation or depths of vegetation or heights of vegetation. In air quality, we have that information and it's a lot clearer. But I think for this project, what we're trying to do is collect that knowledge. So over the next 6 months, we probably will have a much better understanding of that. And we can share that through the GoGreenRoutes team when we do. Are you involved in assessments? No. One of the things I know is that there's different modeling softwares for the noise barriers. And it's how do you introduce that data, as you say, into the model to analyze. So I don't have that knowledge, I'm afraid, but when we explore this area, I can definitely share it through Maria and her team related to our project. Thanks for your question.
Any other questions? We have quite many people from our strategic planning department. Jaak was also part of that department, asking questions just now.
Well,
Estonians are usually very shy, so that you know.
Okay, Irish people are typically not so shy. I hope though as well you can share my email, Maria, with everyone. I'm more than happy to take questions or to open a discussion. That's a very good question by your colleague, because it's trying to understand. We also need tools. That's always the case with designing things. We need a tool to design air quality. We have the tools. With green infrastructure, the US Environmental Protection Agency have a tool that can help you design green boundaries around your park, for example, or green boundaries along your highway. But noise, and it has, I don't know if it has that green included in it, which is a challenge. Temperature also, there is tools, but noise might be that one element that's missing.
I was also wondering when you're told that research shows that the person walking just outside of the park actually doesn't get the benefit of air pollution reduction. He gets the highest kind of concentration because he's next to a highway, which basically means that we really have to focus on the quality and greenery of the streets themselves, rather than just rely on the benefits that we get of the nearby park.
Absolutely. We don't appear in a park. We have to walk to it as well. So one of the important things is connecting our spaces. What I think is important is that we separate pedestrians and cyclists also. I shouldn't forget cyclists from the traffic. And putting green between them is the best way possible. My opinion is low green, like hedgerows, because trees, the benefit is in the sky, should I say, and low hedgerows are the most impactful. Now, I don't know if Tallinn's winter conditions, they're the best option, but it's important to separate. One problem we have in Ireland is that cyclists still share with taxis and buses, and they are breathing in the worst pollution possible because of that. So separating, I don't know if Tallinn has enhanced the separation of the two.
We are moving towards it, we could say.
I think that's it's the ambition everywhere. But putting something in between, like a hedgerow or a tree, can have a huge, huge additional benefit.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Livi.
I have a question as well. You talked about evergreens plants there in Ireland, and I thought about that. How many native species you have there in Ireland you can choose between? For example, we here have only 4, and 2 of them are quite low, so we can't use them near the roads. But how it is the situation there?
I'm afraid I cannot answer, Lily, because again, this is me as an engineer. I am not a very knowledgeable person about tree species. I'm sorry. I will speak to my colleagues about this, but I don't believe we have many species either. And I agree that one problem of putting them in the city is their root system has a lot of negative impacts on pipes and other infrastructure, so we have to be very careful about the species we select.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a big fan of small hedgerows, because there's a lot of species that we can select from, although I don't know if they are native. That's the other problem. But yes, I don't know. If I find out, I will share with Maria. I will consider it a challenge for myself. Sorry, I don't have the answer.
That's okay. I just thought about it, just to compare with the different countries.
Yeah, it's so different in every country as well. That's the big challenge.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there may be some other questions. Well, we also, yeah.
Maybe it's a Monday for everyone, though. Maria,
That's true. That's true. But once again, you are all free to turn directly to John or through myself or my colleagues in välisprojektide osakond, kompetentsikeskus. So in any case, we can wrap it up, I guess. It's 4 o'clock here in Tallinn, and we planned it as an approximately 1 hour meeting between us. So we are on time. People still will have time to finish their work on this busy Monday day. Thank you so much, John, for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us. I will share with everyone your slides if you are okay with that, together with your contacts and the links from those guidances you showed in the last slide. And yeah, if anyone have any questions about GoGreenRoutes project in general, or you want to somehow give an input, feel free. I'm not sure how much we will be implementing specifically nature-based solutions connected with air pollution in our pilot area, but definitely we can do a test round or something if you feel that it's very useful for your work also, that we can just have a small test in our pilot area.
Oh, great.
So that's useful.
Yeah, I mean, we hope this can transfer to other places in other parts of the city and country. So I hope what we learn in the project will benefit.
Yes. Okay, so thank you all. We will be leaving this meeting and see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.